So welcome back to Ethics TV, everyone. I'm joined today by Mihretu, and I must admit, I'm very honored to be joined by this particular guest because of the writings that I've been enjoying online, and also some of the talks, the video talks that you can find online. And for those watching, I'll include links in the bio below to his online material. So Mihretu, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me on your show, Jonathan. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, and likewise. And I think one of the questions that I tend to ask to start things off, and I have a personal interest in the answer to this with you especially, is what is it that's keeping you busy at the moment that's the most exciting or fascinating part of your work?
Yep, I think it should be expected that everyone is kind of mildly interested in AI these days, and everyone is breathing that air, and I am no different than anyone else. And I think I just finished teaching at Talbot School of Theology, philosophy of AI, which is a graduate level course, which I introduced, and I had an awesome time with students. We were talking about AI, and we're approaching everything from a metaphysical, philosophical standpoint. And when people talk about issues like, oh, AI can be conscious, oh, it's a matter of making sophisticated algorithms, and all of a sudden, we will find ourselves on the same boat, and we are no different than the sophisticated gadgets. We might be biologically kind of highly sophisticated people, but we can get there. We can just prove that we're no different than computer gadgets and so on. I think that kind of fascination with our own work, with our own creativity, and in the process of doing that, the metaphysical assumptions that we make without being aware of that we are making such assumptions is pretty intriguing to me. So I'm very fascinated with AI, especially as an expert in philosophy of mind myself. My PhD is on philosophy of mind, and I have done postdoctoral studies on consciousness studies, and also metaphysics and so on. So it's for me, it's very personal. I have literally no option but deal with the situation that surrounds AI because it is directly related to my profession. So I'm very intrigued whether human beings have capability to reproduce human capacities in the gadgets that they produce or they invent. And I am, to be honest with you, very skeptical for metaphysical reasons. And I know people talk about the practical aspect of AI, and some people make this egregious claims that, oh, we're no different than gadgets. What does it even mean? Where do you get that metaphysical property to create a being like you, or to reproduce and replicate human capacities on gadgets? The gadgets invented by you are reflections of your capacity. So to be able to create a capacity that you have means you know the ins and outs of the capacities you have. The problem with that thinking is you have not created or invented your own capacities. You find yourself with the set of capacities that you have. So you're not responsible for your capacities. You've contributed nothing to have them. Therefore, you have no idea how you end up with this capacity. All you can do, you can utilize them, you can use them, but you are not an expert on your own capacities because the capacities didn't emerge out of your own effort or out of your own research. So look, it's a sheer arrogance to say that, oh, I can create consciousness. Here's my question to you. Well, not to you. I'm just using you as a kind of a general representative of my audience. What exactly is consciousness? Right now, we do not have the slightest idea. It doesn't mean we're not conscious. It doesn't mean that we don't know that we are conscious. What I'm saying when I say we don't have the slightest idea, we don't know what this phenomenon, where does it come from? Like, what's its connection to the nervous system? Is consciousness equals, let's say, the firing of neurons inside my brain, or neurotransmitters hitting each other, and all these different kinds of neurotransmitters, or any physiological activities in my brain? We do not know. And there is zero progress in science, zero progress in philosophy in terms of tackling this the nature of a phenomenon of consciousness, the subjective aspect of consciousness. And so many people who think that, oh, it's a piece of cake, out of frustration, they will tell you consciousness doesn't exist. We're not even conscious. What does that mean? I mean, why should I believe for a second a person who tells me that we're not conscious? Well, I am conscious. It's obvious. The most obvious thing in the world to me is the fact that I'm conscious. So you look, it would be harder than rocket science for you to convince me otherwise.
Yeah, well, I must admit, I happen to have a very, very similar point of view, and I'm not just saying that. I think you've succinctly spelled out a number of my persistent concerns, and I'm trying to pick which one I want to go into with you, because there's so much in that, but it's actually quite basic in terms of a hypothesis of challenge. And the one I think I'm going to start with is the assumption of an inventor inventing something that is that is a reflection of their capabilities, that they then somehow conflate into a statement of humankind. That concerns me greatly. Or there's the other rabbit hole to explore, which is the complete absence inside that invention of an acceptance of phenomenology that, even from a skeptical point of view, is something that we don't understand. From an apologetic point of view, one could say that we at least have a grasp of what the probabilistic storyline has led us to. But from an agnostic standpoint alone, the phenomenology inside that would be 98% of stuff we don't know, therefore we don't know. But the sheer arrogance, to paraphrase your point, of assuming all of the above is contained within something that can be programmed in lines of code, and therefore retrospectively essentially downcasts humanity as something that's not based on phenomenology, or there's no metaphysical constructs to discuss. We are purely binary creatures that run like code. I can't help but wonder whether or not that's some form of pathological or maybe narcissistic view of engineering that has led us to those conclusions.
100%. I mean, look, people often talk about like, oh, okay, your nervous system works like there are codes inside your nervous system. It's nothing but biological algorithm. What does that mean? Look, you have no idea what you're talking about. Look, we can take imaging, we can use functional magnetic resonance imaging, or a PET scan, or CAT, all these like different imaging techniques. Bring any neuroscientist to me who can show me that there's a biological algorithm written out inside my nervous system.
Well, and actually, that's an interesting point. When I was doing my diploma in neurology, I did a neuroeconomics diploma, and the end of the entire course at the graduation time, the last chapter of the last part of the syllabus was, and that's as much as we know. And we were left with, all of us students are left with 50 times more questions than answers. And literally the professor said at the end, that's as far as we've got. And this was 3 years ago when I graduated. So he's like, this is as far as we've got. We don't know. And so, from bearing in mind, from the scientific fact of our empirical understanding of pretty much not having a clue how this whole operation operates, no, I find it nothing.
If you take, for example, memory, I work on philosophy of neuroscience, and I actually take philosophy of neuroscience from time to time. And I have done some kind of certificate level work in different universities, including Harvard and Cambridge and so on. Look, if you take memory system, for example, I would like to go on record in saying that our understanding of how human memory system works is almost 0.0001, maybe below that. And then when you read psychological literature, they come up with this bogus kind of categorizations, episodic memory, short memory, blah. That tells me nothing about how memory system works. It's kind of a nice statements described using excellent English and so on. I can understand that, I can enjoy that. You are not explaining to me anything about the nature of memory. For example, down-to-earth example to your listeners. You read a book. Let's suppose you and I have decided to read a book, let's say, I don't know, just let's say Richard Swinburne's book, let's say A Philosophy of Mind or something like that. We've read that book and we get together on somewhere in the Starbucks or something like that to talk about the book. So look, you haven't chewed up the book when you read it. I haven't chewed up the book when I read it. I read it, I closed it, I threw away, and I meet with you. Look, the information like starts gushing out of my wherever it's coming from. What did I do to save that information? Nothing. I have no idea what went from the book to my brain, and where in the brain, I don't have any idea. You might say, oh, hippocampus or synaptic connections, blah, blah. You have no even a hint. What went to synaptic connections? Like, let's look up like hippocampus. It's a structure.
Yeah. But also, yeah, I mean, also I remember from the neurology studies, one of the challenges was that we don't have the machinery to look as deeply into the small neuron-based wiring to see much more than kind of condensed or comprehensive imagery of activity happening here versus activity happening there, which is not dissimilar to how we look into outer space. And we look as far as we possibly can with the various different telescopes, and we think to ourselves, well, we've got an understanding maybe of something happening at some point. Is the universe 14 billion years, or is it 23 billion years, or is it actually completely infinite, or whatever? And so for anyone to state that an expertise based on something that is physically impossible at the moment to study, either because it's so far away or because it's so very small, so moving on to because we're in complete agreement on this, and you've said my concerns very concisely. So what I've often wondered, and I'd love your take on this, is, do you feel that the people who are building artificial intelligence systems are aware of the nonsense of claims, but that they still make as essentially PR statements almost against humanity, and at least the metaphysical constructs of humanity? Or are they ignorant to it, and therefore a frog in a well cannot conceive of the ocean? So is it based on awareness but the inertia, or is it based on ignorance? What would you say?
Look, I would like to say it's based on ignorance, but that ignorance is innocent ignorance. Innocent by that I mean, take for example the distinction between weak AI and a strong AI. Weak AI is not controversial. You invent tools that serve you in some way. They make your life easier, and so on and so forth. And I have a car, let's say sophisticated, blah, blah. It's wonderful. So a strong AI has nothing to do with producing tools just for the sake of using them. A strong AI is an entirely philosophically charged project within computer science. Its aim is just to produce conscious beings in gadgets, consciousness in gadgets, and coming up with a super intelligent beings, and then proving that you are not a different entity in any way. You're just as ordinary as anything else is. And the super intelligent things that human beings create are superior to you. So the strong AI project is entirely motivated by philosophical, metaphysical goal in mind. But I'm not saying that those people really have a clear understanding of this and, oh, our goal is metaphysical and blah, blah. but they have this energy and motivation that, human beings are not unique creatures at all. Human beings are just ordinary biological organisms, and we can create these gadgets and so on. Here's like my challenge. So to be able to reproduce consciousness or something like that, look, what it takes is not technological sophistication. What it takes is a metaphysical property that you need to have to be able to literally be not inventor in this sense, creative. So do you have that metaphysical property? And my answer to that would be briefly, no, you don't. And that's one thing. The other thing that these people are so ignorant is, okay, if we haven't even secured the most rudimentary solution for the problem of consciousness, how can you jump the gun and say you are ready and you are qualified to reproduce consciousness? What exactly is consciousness? You have no idea. If you don't have idea about X, where is this confidence coming from to reproduce X in gadgets? There's just a shocking ignorance, First of all, there is a metaphysical hurdle in the way. You don't have that property. Secondly, you don't have an idea about this mental aspect of human beings. And look, we talked about memory. I don't have to chew off the book. Okay, what is information? What kind of information is this? Where is it sitting? Where is it getting stored? How am I retrieving it whenever I need it? There's no save button on my body where I click on a sort of button, save. I read save. I do that with my computer, but not with my body. So if I want to remember something, why is it that what I'm remembering is literally specifically controlled by the context within which I need that information? The context governs. Look, you remember so many things, and you've stored a ton of information about so many different things. Why do you think every time you need a specific body of information, that information is going to be made available to you, but not the rest? What is blocking? What's blocking? Like every information you ever stored is stored in your mind, simply gushes out of yourself. Then that would be disastrous because it would be hard to control. It would be very overwhelming. There is order in your life. There is order, discipline in your life. You remember certain things when you need them. And other things are dormant, deactivated. What activates them, and so on and so forth. There are a ton of theories out there. We do not have any idea. We can do those things effortlessly. But when you study them, it's not really as pretty as you might think. So for me, the ignorance is through the roofs in AI stuff. Now, people are really saying that AI can't be conscious. Look, you explain to me how you can create consciousness or mental states through number crunching gadget. One plot. Like, computer syntax is entirely given by math, right? You use math. You use syntactical procedures and so on. Well, look, nothing is created out of that about us. So it's like the whole infrastructure of AI is not only not equipped, it is entirely irrelevant to create the so-called consciousness or mental state. Dude, that's irrelevant infrastructure.
Yeah.
So there is a deep confusion here, and people are making it sound like, oh, this is a piece of cake. Nothing is a piece of cake. And there's no free lunch here. So I am very, very skeptical about this strong AI proponents' claims. Transhumanism, singularity, for example, in transhumanism, and in 2024, 2030, human beings will be hybrid species, and so on and so forth. You hear all sorts of things. So I'm not really signing up for that, and I'm not joining that group because there are so many metaphysical hurdles in the way.
Yes, I mean it's an interesting. I think that's very generous. The claim of ignorance of them being ignorant. I think it's nice and generous and diplomatic. I suspect that maybe in some cases there is an awareness of the complete ridiculousness of claims, but that doesn't serve shareholder purpose. Therefore, So, but I find it potentially similar to what happens when let's take an example, like famous podcasters. At the moment, many of the famous podcasters are kind of lauding or looking forward to the moment when artificial intelligence will be better than humans, smarter than humans, and more human than humans, and all these other these hyperbolic statements, as if that means that then what happens next is we get to just live creatively fulfilled, lazy lives because the artificial intelligence does everything, which of course in and of itself puts aside our entire joy in pursuit and our profit of our labors and the effort required to achieve something and the feeling of achievement, even if it's a trivial pursuit to some, like weeding a garden. So it puts aside all those things. What I'm wondering is, what happens then when or if the fiction that is spread so far and wide at the moment is shown to be the emperor without clothes? What happens then when people who think in the similar ways to you and I are suddenly listened to and it becomes obvious to the world that the emperor isn't wearing any clothes? What happen? Do you think that's going to happen at some stage? And when it happens, what happens next?
Okay, I think it's very early to say that many people are getting a clearer picture of the limitations of AI, our own limitations. For example, when you mentioned, this famous podcasters and so on, oh, AI will be better than us. Look, the very claim that AI is better than us is a self-defeating claim. Here's why. Look, AI is the product of your mind. It doesn't matter how complicated it is. It doesn't matter how fast it executes certain things and so on. You are one step ahead necessarily and metaphysically when it comes to these gadgets. For example, if you take, I have actually, I don't think we have enough time, but I am working on a very excellent mathematical model that I'm calling it N+1. N+1 is a mathematical model, which is N+1 is, as it stands, is not an equation, it's an expression, but it's a mathematical model. The whole idea behind N+1 is, for any given step we take in making computers sophisticated, we are necessarily one step ahead because it's taking us, our intelligence, our planning, our effort, and our ingenuity, not the ingenuity of the gadget itself. For example, let's suppose we created all these gadgets and they become self-independent and they can run their own cities, they can get married, they can have their own kids, they can send, they can be grandparents and grandkids, blah, blah, whatever. Look, the buck stops with us. We are their gods. It started with us. They will never be able to ontologically to be on equal footing with us. It's just saying like this. The example that I'm going to use is not going to be applicable to so many people, probably who listen to your stuff. Let's take God. Let's God believers. Okay, God. Okay, if people who believe in God, they will never entertain the thought that, oh, we now created drones and we invented these gadgets. Now we are equal with God. No, look, God mapped out your existence. He brought you into this world, and he is the sole responsible entity in bringing you into this world. You have literally zero chance to be ontologically to be on equal footing with God, no matter what you end up doing in your life, no matter how far you could go in what you do. There is unbridgeable ontological gap, period. There's nothing you can do about it. It's sort of saying like, if there are natural numbers, whole numbers, for example, if you start with 0 and count all the way up into infinity, look, if you start with 1, it's not a whole number. So you must necessarily start by counting with 0. Like there are certain things, there is nothing you can do to change the state of affairs that are true of those things. So in the case of us, look, the gadgets that we're inventing, it took our imagination, even if we make them to be independent of us, even if they end up doing literally marvelous things. We always maintain our ontological status forever and ever. We are one step ahead of these gadgets. N+1 model works. I have never heard any counterexample so far that convinced me even remotely that N+1 model can be challenged. It's a metaphysical claim.
So for those who are listening or watching who are not of a let's say those who are watching or listening who are of a secular view rather than a religious view. So from a secular view, I would place to those listeners or watchers that you could replace the word God in this context with nature. So what you're saying, Mihretu, is so there's nature, and then there's everything that nature has created and enabled. And there's nothing that can be created or enabled that then somehow superimposes or supplants nature. It goes nature then everything else. So for those who are listening or watching who are turned off by the use of the word God, you can replace it with the word nature, and the same argument holds.
Absolutely, 100%. You see, my argument is not like, it's not a rocket science to see the core aspect of this argument. Like, there's nothing you can do. And actually use some simple example of climbing up to the tip of Mount Everest, for example. Let's suppose out of all these 7 billion people on the face of the earth, if I were the first person to have ever climbed to the summit of Mount Everest, and I hold what I call historical superiority, no matter how many people end up climbing to the summit of Mount Everest after I already did, no one would have any chance to take that status from me. End of the game, full stop, and have a good day. I maintain historical superiority no matter how many people end up climbing to the top of Mount Everest. In a parallel fashion, look, these gadgets didn't emerge from out of nowhere. It took literally everything you've ever had as a tool. It already existed in a rudimentary form in nature. So it took you ingenuity and creativity to turn it into any kind of tool that you turned it into. Let's say car or computer or drone or whatever that you end up inventing. So look, these things came as a result of us and because of us. How can anyone argue then that, oh, now we can ontologically surrender our status to gadgets that we invented? That's literally putting the cart before the horse. It's getting everything upside down. It is the confusion of first order magnitude. You have no luck to swallow this pill, whether you like it or not. I say that not with a sense of arrogance. I say that because it's so obvious. It's a waste of time and energy to really say, oh yeah, we're going to create a super intelligence. Let me tell you, if you can be in a position to create super intelligence, who is intelligent then? The creator or the product? I mean, it baffles me. It literally confuses me how people miss this point. If you have an ability to create a super intelligence, then you are doubly super intelligent, because without you, super intelligence cannot come into being. So my model, +1, N+1, you're already ahead of one step ahead.
Yeah,
so
it's true.
The whole point of singularity is a contradiction in terms because of that. And I don't take it personally with any degree of seriousness, by the way. I'm sorry to say that.
I think that's fair. I think what's interesting is that I am as equally as perplexed by arguments that claim a super intelligence when we don't understand our own intelligence. The best that seems to be able to be created would be an artificial general stupidity, at best, largely due to our almost complete or lack of understanding of how our own intelligence works. So I'm concerned of it from that prospect too. There's the N+1 aspect of the first person up Everest is still the first person up Everest, and then there's the other one, which is from a neurological standpoint, a physiological standpoint, and then a metaphysical standpoint, we have no idea of the mapping that would enable us to then apply a map to something that we artificially construct. So from a logical standpoint, like it doesn't even require advanced scientific understanding. It just doesn't make any sense.
Ancient philosophers understood this without zero problem. If you take Aristotle talks about artifacts. Artifacts are computers, drones, whatever that we invented. And Aristotle talks about like there's ontological gap between artifacts and natural entities, natural biological entities like us. They never had any problem. In fact, confusing artifacts with biological entity is a very unacceptable stuff for ancient philosophers. So it's very obvious. I think what's happening here is a worldview clash. So there's a deeper problem, a deeper thing going on underneath. So this is a very easy stuff to understand. But if people are trying to prove that we are nothing but like ordinary biological gadgets and so on, the truth is the exact opposite. We're not. We cannot be equated or reduced to the gadgets that we invent. If they are insisting that they can reproduce and replicate consciousness and the rest of other mental aspects of our nature, they know that they can't do that. So what's driving the whole show is some sort of worldview, some sort of literally kind of, I don't know, scientific religion or you name it. I don't care about the terms. But for me, it's really obvious that it makes no sense. If I am the main actor, literally like in creating these gadgets, then I cannot come and then say, oh, I am inferior to you.
Yeah, well, it's the same. It would be the same as saying it's the same as you having a son that your wife gives birth to, and then someone makes an argument that your son is going to become your father, become its own father, and it's like, well, no, because that's ontologically speaking, it went me then son, and so it doesn't go me then son. Son goes before. It doesn't work like that.
In metaphysics, we have a saying that asymmetric asymmetric relation, certain relations are symmetrical, like let's say 2 plus 3 is the same thing as 3 plus 2, and the sum is always the same. So asymmetric relationship, one of the examples that metaphysicians use is literally the son-father relationship. So the father has a son, but the son cannot have the father as his son or something like that. So there's asymmetrical relation. So it really doesn't work. And this is exactly what this sort of problem that we're having here. So I think there's a huge confusion here, by the way. I mean, honestly, for me, AI is also has its own side effects when it comes to education, but that's not the topic of our talk. But I have so many worries about AI stuff. And in the context of education, my position is we don't need it. It's utter garbage. And you download things from ChatGPT or you help yourself up, with ChatGPT, and then you think that you're mastering things. You're not mastering things. You're completely losing everything. Organic skills should not be surrendered to these gadgets. I do not believe in the sanctity of education that comes in that way. It's a fake stuff.
Socrates agreed with you. So Socrates' view was that writing stuff down or taking stuff purely from what had been noted is makes our minds lazy, and it stops us using the function of humanity. Mihretu, I think what we should do is we should pause here, and I'm going to ask my team to reach out to you to schedule a second version of this call, because there's a lot here, but it's incredibly important. And without showing favorites or bias, which I kind of have to here because of the moment in time, this topic has to be given more of a platform and more of a stage. So we have to have follow-up, and we have to go through everything from education to healthcare and all the way through philosophy, back through metaphysics and phenomenology and ontology and the genesis of everything, and then time. And so there's more that we have to cover. But so for now, thank you so much, and we will have another one within the next few weeks. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me, Jonathan. I really enjoyed talking to you. It was very enjoyable.
Brilliant.